Hey everybody, GC13 here. Steven and the Stevens was the 22nd episode of Steven Universe, but even an entire series, film, and epilogue after, it's still the cause of some confusion. I see people say two things about it an awful lot. The first is that the original Steven died as a result of the episode. In some versions of this one, they even posit that there are numerous doomed timelines where their Earth was destroyed by the cluster because their Steven was lost when the Glass of Time was destroyed. Those tellings are very dark. Thankfully, for reasons I'll get to in a bit, I'm pretty sure all of Steven's timelines are nice and intact. The second point is a lot less depressing. Some people think that Homeworld should have tried to use the Glass of Time to save Pink Diamond from being shattered. While the first season does have some early installment weirdness, I don't think the Glass of Time is uniquely out of sync with the rest of the series. Though I do note that we didn't see any more cool artifacts like it or the Replicator Wand when we got to Homeworld. Still though, I do think that there's a very good reason for Homeworld not to have tried to change the past. You see, while these are both very common points to be made, they ignore how messy time travel is generally, and how the Glass of Time seems to work specifically. Let's start off with the first issue, how messy time travel usually is in stories. That really would put the kibosh on anyone who knows about the artifact, its powers and its limitations, trying to use it to save a dead diamond. It's one of the very common tropes that you see when time travel comes up in fiction. Whenever you consciously try to alter the past, time resists violently. In Steven's case, his attempt to prevent a minor accident at the car wash results in the entire car wash burning down. To Steven's credit, he doesn't need to ask follow-up questions. He immediately gives up on getting his father to play at Beachapalooza with him, prevents his own ill-fated intervention in time, and decides to use his past-crawling powers to alter the future instead. We don't know everything about how the Glass of Time works. We don't know whether every attempt to change the past results in disaster, or whether Steven was just very unlucky. We do know that the Glass of Time doesn't just have the power to go into the past. Steven very famously hopped forward into the episode Ocean Gem, after Lapis had dried up the Beach City coast. Whether this means that the timeline in Steven Universe is fixed, or whether the Glass of Time just has a Sapphire's power to predict the future, we don't know. But it is worth considering when trying to decide whether an attempt to alter the past should have been made. Of course, I have a bigger reason for thinking that any attempt to alter the past is largely pointless. Based on the dramatic climax to Steven and the Stevens, I don't think that the Glass of Time actually moves you into the past at all. I think it creates a past to move you into. If I'm right, this hits both concerns at once. Homeworld didn't try to save Pink because they knew they couldn't, and the original Steven is still alive because the only Stevens that died were the ones created by the Glass of Time. Remember, the timeline of Steven and the Stevens is messed up. It's a time travel story after all. From our perspective, Steven gets the Glass of Time, later learns how to activate it, then recruits some Stevens to form a group, then eventually starts running into other identical groups of Stevens, all with their own glasses of time. From the perspective of the Steven who concluded the episode, however, as soon as he touches the Glass of Time, other Stevens start appearing. Bedlam ensues until the first Steven to appear smashes the Glass of Time, at which point first the copies of the artifact start to poof away, then the Stevens themselves begin to turn to sand. Remember, Handsome Steven didn't smash his own Glass of Time, the one that he had recruited all of the other Stevens with. He smashed the Glass of Time that our final Steven touched. If those Stevens were from other timelines, though, why would they suffer a critical existence failure just because someone else's time machine was destroyed? Why would they turn into sand if they were made of their own flesh and blood? There is no reason. A much better explanation is that they turned into sand because the magical hourglass that had created and was sustaining them had been destroyed. The Steven we started with never actually tried to tell his dad that the boat was too fat, because he never actually existed. Since the Steven we ended with would have done those things, the Glass of Time created the results of that timeline that would be occurring in its present. Remember, we already saw that the Glass of Time is able to predict the events of Ocean Gem. Why couldn't it predict the events of Steven and the Stevens? Everything being a creation of the Glass of Time would fit with the Diamond's observed behavior too. If they know about the Glass of Time, then surely they know how it works. If it works by creating the past to show you, rather than physically taking you to the past or a piece of the past to you, then they would have a reason not to bother using it. They know that whatever the Glass of Time gives them, it isn't pink. I'm not going to say they might not have been tempted. Look at the first season of Infinity Train. In its final episodes, we get a look at a character so stricken with grief over the loss of a loved one that she devoted her entire life to trying to create even just a facsimile of him. Blue and Yellow both had their own ways to handle grief, however, and they didn't involve immersing themselves in a fantasy world. So, take comfort, everyone. We've made it through the entire franchise to date with our original Steven, and there aren't any alternate timelines out there missing theirs. That's what I see when I watch Steven and the Stevens anyway. How do you think the Glass of Time works? How differently do you think Steven and the Stevens would have played out if it had worked like it did back in the pilot? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more cartoon videos.